Okay. Uh, give your name and when you were born.
Dale Hardwick, born November 25th, 1928,
Where were you born?
at my Grandpa and Grandma Hardwick's house, and I don't know who the midwife was.
What's your earliest childhood memory?
Probably when my brother died, Brother Marshall died.
How old was he?
He was like 7 months,
And how old do you think you were?
maybe 4.
And what do you remember about it?
I remember my dad carrying this little casket in the house at my Grandpa and Grandma's house. That's where they had the funeral. That's probably the earliest that I remember. And
And what do you remember about the house you were growing up in? Because I think you told me you lived in different houses as you were growing
we
up.
did. We moved around a lot. And I guess everybody was doing it in those days. A lot of rental farms. And I guess, but by the time I started school, we lived 5 miles northeast of Humbird. And there were several farmers out there who had bought 80 acres. The county had this land, and then they sold it. They wanted to get it on the tax roll, so they sold it cheap. And so we went out there, and it was just a lot of timber. We had to rub it out, and it was a lot.
Was that the place that you drove me by
Yes.
a couple years ago?
Yes, and it was a lot of hard work, and that's where I started school. Well, I started school in the first grade there. I went to school in Humbird, and
How did you get to school?
we rode when the roads were good. We rode in a delivery wagon, and most of them were the Dodge delivery wagons, like a panel.
Uh-huh.
And then they put 2 planks down, one down each side. That was our seat, so we sat on that. And they get about 12, 15 people in there, kids in there. And in the wintertime, we went with horse and sleigh.
Oh, really?
And we had it was 5 miles. So it took a while. We left to go to school in the dark and got home in the dark. And so it was a long ride. And sometimes the roads weren't too good even with the horses. And we'd get stuck. And so once in a while they'd tip over. We'd have to get out and everybody helped tip it back up again. And
No, was it just mostly your siblings that were riding on
no,
this?
by the time we got to school, we'd probably have 15, 18 kids in there. We'd pick them up on the way to school
Uh-huh.
in different areas. And they had a little small stove that they fired with coal
For the winter?
for the winter. So it was always nice and warm in there.
So you had a covering over you?
Yes, we had seats, and the back would come up about halfway up on your back, and then it was canvas there for about 3 feet, and then it had a metal roof on it.
Oh.
And so it was warm, yeah. And then the door in front had a hole in it, and that's where the guy drove the horses through that. And, you know, and I remember Arnold Matty was our school bus driver. Still remember the names of the horses, Queen and Beauty.
Wow. What do you remember about school? Was it like a one-room schoolhouse? Or?
No, they had no school when I got there. And my first grade teacher was Miss Johnson. And the first school reunion I went to in Humbird, she was there. She was one of the speakers.
Really?
She taught 2 years there, so I heard for first and second grade. She taught 2 grades. And after the second year, the school board thought she should help out with the lunch program because they didn't think she was staying busy. And we all wore these 4-buckle overshoes. She said I hated buckling those overshoes. She helped the kids at night and for recess. And so she only taught there 2 years and then left, yeah.
Wow.
And but we had a hot lunch program, and we ate a lot of Spanish rice. Everybody had a tin cup, and then and so we would get some of that, and we would have sandwiches with us from home, and we'd have the Spanish rice, and then we'd rinse the cup out, and then we'd get postum. You probably don't know what that is. It's between coffee and hot chocolate or something like that. And during the war, there was coffee was rationed, and so that's what we had to drink. Then we drank this. So we had a hot meal at noon, really, you know, and yeah, and I guess we had that all the way through school. I guess, yeah.
What were your parents like when you were a little kid? What were your mom and dad like when you were a little kid?
Everybody worked hard. They worked hard.
Like did you work hard when you were like 5 years old?
No. Well, we all helped with, in the summertime. In the summertime, we picked a lot of berries. We had a lot of berries. My mother did a lot of canning. There was no electricity. And so she canned a lot of strawberries. First thing would be June berries in the spring. And then we'd have choke cherries, blackberries, and cranberries. They all grew wild. And us kids would pick those. Mm-hmm. And the blueberries were the toughest because we always had to stand in swampy water, you know, to pick them. And yeah, it was some long hot days there picking blueberries. And strawberries. We picked strawberries for neighbors, and we got a cent and a half a quart for picking them. And then there was a canning factory in Humbird that canned green beans, and we would pick those also for the neighbors. We got a cent and a half a pound for picking those. And you had to really pick fast to get 100 pounds in one day. And Winnie could do it. She was good at picking strawberries too. Yeah. And yeah, we worked like that. Yes, we did. Yeah.
So, did you guys have a farm, or did you have like a barn and a house?
This was 80 acres. Not much of a house, not much of a barn. But we had, I think in those years, about 4 cows, a team of horses, quite a few chickens. We never went hungry. But my mother used to bake 10 to 12 loaves of bread every other day. So.
Wow.
Yeah. So we ate a lot of bread, and but we never left the table hungry. And I don't know. It was hard work because we grew up. We had to help, you know, when they cut these trees and a lot of brush, you know, that we'd always have to drag that brush and put it in a pile, and then they'd burn it, you know. Then they'd have to plow this land up for the first time, and it was tough. It was tough going.
How much older is Waylon?
9 years. And Daryl was 2 years younger than me. And then we had Marshall, was 2 years younger than that. And then Lamar, now I think he's 9 years younger than I am.
Wow, so, that's a big gap.
Yeah. And I'm number 5 in the family. I was right in the middle out of 10. So, yeah. And
what was your mom like when you were young?
We had a nice mom. Our mom went to the 8th grade, and her dad wouldn't let her go to high school, so she went to 8th grade 2 years in a row. She had 3 sisters, and they all went to college, teachers' college, and Mom wasn't allowed to go. She was the oldest. And then she must have been about 21 when she got married. 20, 21. And just, she was pregnant off and on for 20 years. For 10 kids every 2 years. And yeah, she worked very hard.
And did your dad just farm, or did he have a job? Or
he did part-time farming, part-time working. Yeah.
What kind of jobs did he have?
Just everything. I remember one time he worked in Eau Claire for White's Machine Shop, and drove a school bus for I think about 4 years one time, and did worked on some construction, worked in the feed mill, and then we left that farm there in the woods for in 1940, I believe it was, 41, at the start of World War II. And
How old were you when World War II started?
about 15, I think.
And
then we moved to a farm. Our mail carrier had a farm, and it was only 2 miles from town. And he was a substitute mail carrier, and when he got the full-time job, he came and he said, well, you got these 2 young boys, because all the older men were in service. And he said, I'd like to rent my farm to you. So that's when we moved there. And that was a lot of hard work too. And that's when my dad started having heart trouble. And so when I was 16, I was doing a man's job. And
now you told me that at one point you lived with another family. You didn't live with your family?
no, I always lived.
No, didn't you say that you went and worked on another farm and you lived with that family?
No,
Well, I thought you told me that.
no, I don't think so. I had worked with some of the neighbors, but I always came home every night.
Oh, okay.
And but we had that's probably the best we had it. And all the time that I remember being home was those 4 years we were on that farm.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was during the war, World War II, and Wayland was in service, like all the neighbors that were that age. And like I say, my dad got sick and spent a lot of time in the house. And
Got sick in what way?
he had heart trouble and didn't take his medication like he was supposed to. And so he was sick a lot. And my mom helped her too. Before we got a milk machine, she helped milk cows too, besides taking care of everybody else, the kids and cooking. And she didn't have it easy. And my dad wasn't the easiest to work for.
Really? He
No,
was
he
hard?
wasn't. He worked hard, yeah. He'd go to town and say, no, when I get back, I want this done and this done. And if it wasn't done, we heard about it. So, well, not very nice words either.
So when you say you were working on the farm, I'm assuming you were working with your siblings also? Like, did your sisters work? Like, were they milking cows?
No, they didn't. No, the sisters didn't. No. Daryl helped milk. And then Lamar Lamar was only like, I think when I left home in 1947, and I think he was like 9 years old then, about that time. And, well, then Wayland, the war was over and Wayland had come home. So and then Bud Kelch was back from the service. He was dating Joyce. And,
Did they date before he went to
No.
In the war?
no. And then his dad was a blacksmith in Humbert, and he worked for his dad for a while, and he wanted to leave and move on. And he talked to a fellow in the barber shop one day that worked for AT&T, and he said they were looking for help. He said, anybody around here want to go to work? So he gave Bud a telephone number to call in Minneapolis. So Bud came out and said he knew I was not happy there at home, and there was younger brothers coming up, and so it was time for me to move on. So I think I was 19 about that time, and so Bud and I went to Minneapolis and filled out an application, had a physical that day, and went to work the same day.
How far along did you get in high school?
I got to junior in high school. I was in my junior year when my dad didn't think education was necessary anyway. And I was out 1 year, and I was going to go back the next year. And then it was so busy that we couldn't. So then I didn't finish my high school until after I got out of the service. And I got a GED
Mm-hmm.
in Valley City, North Dakota. And but then I also took some classes through the telephone company,
Mm-hmm.
correspondence. Took some math courses and some electronic, and they had a lot of schools too. I went to a lot of schools through there, so it was good. The schools would be a week or two at a time, and yeah. So that was.
So you said you and Bud got an application from Minneapolis?
Yeah, we went to work in Minneapolis, and our first job was they kept us together. We went to Hammond, Wisconsin. It's near Hudson, just east of Hudson. And we worked there maybe a month, and to St. Paul. And with that line crew, we traveled 8 states. And in the 2 years I worked there with them, we hit all 8 states. And like a month here, a month there. So.
Do you guys stay in like bunkhouses or tents? Or?
No, we stayed in hotels.
Oh, nice.
We lived good. We had our boarding room, and I started for and I got $31.50 a week in my room and board, and that was pretty good wages in '47. And Bud got a little more because he had some experience in the Signal Corps in the service,
Mm-hmm.
so he got a few dollars more. It wasn't a lot, but so after we worked there 2 years, and I was in Valley City, North Dakota. Bud and I had split up. We were split. He was working in Grand Forks. I was working in Valley City, and they laid off everybody that come to work, after World War II. If you had to have your 3 years service, and of course nobody did, that started after that, because they got caught up on all their maintenance work. And so then that's when I went back to Wisconsin, and then there was 5 men from my hometown that worked for Northern States Power in Eau Claire. And they said, well, go on up there and get a job. He'll hire you, So I told me who to see. So I went there 5 Monday mornings in a row. And finally he said, if I get you a job, will you leave me alone? And I said, yeah, I'll do that. And so he found me a job at Cornell, Wisconsin, with a contractor that was building steel towers for Northern States Power. And so I went out there and I worked that winter then until I think it was April. That job was done in...
what year was this?
That would have been in 49. The winter of 49 and 50. I worked on the steel towers. And when that was done, then I got a letter from Northwestern Bell and Fargo, and they wanted to know if I was looking for a job. And so I went out there and went to work the next day. And I worked from April until November, and then I was drafted and had to go in the Army. So I had to go back to Wisconsin and to go. So I went back there for a week, and then went to Fort Sheridan, and then over here to Fort McCoy.
Where are they?
Fort Sheridan was in Illinois.
Okay.
It was a processing center for new recruits, and I was assigned to a chemical smoke generator outfit at Fort McCoy. It was a new company that was just starting it up. There was 104 of us in that company, and we were there 10 months training, and then we went to Germany as a unit.
Mm-hmm.
And spent 1 year over there.
Where in Germany?
In Marnheim, which was just a small town 60 miles south of Frankfurt. And we trained all the time we was over there. And our mission was, if at that time it was Russia, they were concerned about Russia, and in fact it was still divided, and we were in the French zone. And when we first got there, Germany was not a free country yet. It was still under power from World War II. And then they become a free country that April of 1950. And so our mission was Wiesbaden Air Base by Frankfurt. If there was an attack, we were to go there and smoke it out. And so we had many dry runs, as they called it. We'd go in the middle of the night and get halfway up there, and then they'd say, "Oh, we called alerts off." Then we'd come back. We would always go prepared for everything.
So what did you do when you like smoked a place?
These generators would burn 50 gallons of oil, like number 10 oil, 5 gallons of water, and 5 gallons of gas an hour, and it heated to 900 degrees, and it would just vaporize and come out like white fog.
Oh, okay. Let's start with how you met Mom.
Oh, yeah, we met at a dance, and then I was out of town there for a month, and I came back, and then we met in a cafe, started talking, and then we started dating after that. And we dated for a couple of years, I guess.
What did you do on a date?
On dates,
Yeah.
Audrey and her husband moved to town in Mellon, Florence, and the three couples of us, we ran around together. You know, we'd go dancing and
Did movie theaters and
theaters.
dinner,
Yeah, once in a while. Yeah, and
play cards.
no, didn't play many cards though, and not only with Ann's family. They played whist. You know, her dad was a real good whist player.
Yeah.
You know, and so yeah, and
So you dated for how long?
a couple of years.
And then you proposed to her?
When we got married, and
How did you propose to her?
I don't know, I don't remember. Bought the ring in Wahpeton. Bud and Joyce were living in Wahpeton at the time. We were down there, and we walked by the jewelry store and saw the ring, and she liked it, so that's what we got. And then we got married in June 19th, 1954.
And you were still living in Valley City?
We lived in Valley City. Yeah, and I had been working up by the Canadian border, so I had a couple hundred miles drive when I come down there every weekend, and a lot of it was gravel roads at that time. Wasn't pleasant driving, a lot of dust.
But what were you doing up by the Canadian border?
I worked on the line crew.
Yeah.
For me, it worked out because I got my board and room, and I was single. And if I would have taken a job installing or something like that, would be the next step, repair, in a town, then I'd have to rent an apartment. And the difference in the pay was very little. So I stayed, when I was single, then I just stayed on the line crew. And then after I got off the line crew, then I asked if I could, oh, no, not right away, it was about 1956. And asked him if I could get located, and he said, "Yep, I can locate you in Fargo right now." So we moved there in February '56 and stayed until '86. So.
And you lived in an apartment? Was that when you
We lived
on 10th Street?
No, we lived on 6th Avenue South on 14th Street first, in an upstairs apartment, two-story house.
Is the building still there?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's right on the corner, 602, I think it was. And then we moved to 1312 North 10th, and we lived there 4 years, and then over to the 1513 North 7th. And there we stayed. Yeah.
And when you guys moved to Fargo, you tried having kids and were having difficulties?
Well, we were married 7 years and didn't have any. Then we had Jim, and we were talking about adopting, and then we had Jeff, and then you, and we found out what was causing it. Yeah.
So you lived on 10th Street with Jim and Jeff?
Just Jim.
Just Jim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you bought our house?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm trying to think now when we bought that. 61. So that's You know, so it was just before Jeff was born, and and yeah, I lived there about 22 years, I suppose. So yeah.
So, what was it about the neighborhood you liked?
Well, they're all pretty friendly, except for next door is north of us. We had our problems with them, but
Yeah.
they could be nice, you know. Yeah, and but no, it wasn't that bad a neighborhood. I had worked that area for quite a while, so a lot of when houses come up for sale, a lot of them I didn't have to go look at. So, but I could see possibilities when we went there. It didn't have a garage, and we could build one, and so that's how we ended up with it. And it was in our price range, you know. So
How much did you pay for the house?
we paid $13,700.
Wow.
And yeah, and our house payment was only $72 a month at that time. Yeah, and yeah, that was pretty reasonable.
So you went from a lineman up north, and then when you moved to Fargo, what were you doing there?
Okay, I worked on a crew. There were cable,
Mm-hmm.
putting underground cable in the manholes, manhole. Worked on the cable crew there for. Well, I hesitated on taking the job because that foreman was really tough. He was just always hollering and cussing and swearing. And so when I asked the superintendent about, he was visiting out there one day, I said, any chance of getting located? He said, well, yeah, you can go and work on Kenny's crew. And I said, oh, he's a pretty tough guy to work for. And he said, you won't have a problem with him. All he wants is an honest day's work. He said, you won't have a problem. And I didn't have a problem with him. And he said, if you take that, and when they're looking for another installer or something like that, he said, you'll be right there handy.
So when did you hook up with Kenny Coupon?
When I moved to Fargo, I had met him a few times before, but then, yeah, we turned out to be good friends, you know, over the years, and yeah, and we worked together a lot too, you know. But I installed and did repair work until 1969, and then they asked me to go in and work in the test center, and I started dispatching then, and I did that for 12 years, and then the last 4 years was doing testing. So, and
One thing I remember as a kid is it seemed like you and Kenny came to our house for lunch every day.
not every day. If we were working together, then I would call your mother and say, Kenny and I are working together, throw another cup of water in the soup. That was always our favorite. And Kenny ate everything. I don't care what you had, he ate it. Yeah, he was pretty good. And then he'd come in and chase you guys all around the house, and yeah, after he'd upstairs, downstairs, and then he might stop and take his overshoes off. Yeah, it was funny. Yeah.
But tell me about the Gundersons. So you moved there and they were already living there?
No. When Donna and Elmer moved to Fargo, I put their phone in, and they were living in another house out south of the college, in that south of the SAE house in there. They had rented a house, and then Donna's dad had built that house. That was new when we moved in there. And he rented it to a couple that was, he was a regional manager for Maytag. He traveled, and she worked for Herbst department store, and real nice couple. Didn't have any kids, and they were from Iowa, and they lived there, I don't know, 3-4 years, I suppose, something like that. And then he got transferred to Oregon. And so they moved, and then Donna and Elmer moved in there. And so she said, "Oh, I remember you. You put our phone in." So yeah, and yeah, that's how we got acquainted with Gundersons. Yeah.
And that's how you got to get to know Elmer?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Elmer, he had a little drinking problem, but he never He knew where he stood with me because if he'd fall down between the house and the garage, and like Johnny Carlson or Gay did go help him, then he'd cuss and swear at him, And if he laid there, I just walked right on by him, He'd look up her, rolling his eyes, and because he wasn't going to holler at me, And one time I went in their house to talk to him, and I didn't know he'd been drinking, and he started in, and right away I put my horseshoes back on, and he said, "And where do you think you're going?" I said, "You don't talk to me that way, Elmer." And he swore me. He said, "No, I don't," and he never did. And he never came over to our place, sat in our yard and drank. He's always stayed in his yard.
Grandma Millie moved to the lake in '66.
1966, yeah. And I think you said 78 is when she died.
She died in '78, yeah.
Okay, yeah. But we did, we went down there quite a bit. And remember, we used to stop and get the roasted chicken?
Yeah.
And take it out there. Yeah.
Because what I remember, it seems like we were there every Sunday after church.
No, not every Sunday,
That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah. And Jeff would sit on the end of the dock, just fishing those little perch, he liked that. And, but like I say, we did a lot of work down there though too, we raked leaves every fall, and it was a lot of work. Mowed lawn.
Push mower.
With a push mower, that's right. Yeah. 2 old ones.
Yeah.
She had one, and I took another one down there. Yeah. But, yeah, that was a nice little place. I'm sure it's still there.
Yeah.
But like she said, she spent 11 years there, and she said, I just can't think of any place where I would have enjoyed it anymore.
Yeah.
And she had been back in her old. That's where she was born and raised, in that area, about 6 miles from there, I guess. And so she had a lot of friends left. And I still recognize in the Fargo paper some of those names. In fact, there was one in there this week. I remember there's Mott's, and she used to talk about them,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when did Grandma get involved with the CB?
When Joe put that antenna up for her down there, and it was really too high, higher than you were supposed to. But he went way up her. I think Father John helped him on that. They put that up, and then she started talking on that. Because when we were in Detroit Lakes, Jeff used to talk to her by the airport.
Yep.
And that would be just unheard of for a CB.
And how far away is Detroit Lakes from?
Well, like 20 miles. So that was pretty good just for 2 locals, And
It was like almost like the early days of a cell phone.
yeah, it was. It really was. Yeah. Jeff would call and tell her to put the coffee pot on, and yeah, that was funny. Yeah. So we had the old '63 Ford.
Yeah.
Down there. Yeah. Had the Lark first. Yeah. And Ray and Lois never didn't come over that much. And
they were over at Ottertail.
They stayed at Ottertail, yeah. So.
And then Grandma died in '78.
Yeah. And they sold it. I don't remember just when they sold that. It was the same year, I guess. Yeah.
And then tell me about when Mom got cancer, because what I remember is that she wasn't feeling well. You guys went to a doctor and she had cancer. Can you talk a little bit about that?
She went to the doctor, and you had, let's see, this was in February, and they said they thought she had pneumonia. So they treated her for pneumonia a couple of weeks, and then she went back for a checkup, and they said, no, it's not pneumonia, there's a tumor in there. That's when it started. So in like from February to June, and that was it. And the type she had was really fast growing.
Didn't she do a bone marrow? Did she?
No, I don't think they ever did the bone marrow on her.
Because I know there was talk about it.
Yeah, but she went really fast. So, she drove for her chemo treatment on Thursday, and I said, "Now you want me to take off?" And no, she said, "You'll probably have to do that later on, maybe." But no, I'm all right. She drove down there on Thursday, and she died the next Wednesday, you know. And then she came home, and she didn't tell me what the doctor told her that day. He said, "Go home and get things in order," because he said, "You're limited to days." And she didn't tell me that. But on Sunday, she said she had this terrible pain in her back, and she said, "I think I better go back to the hospital." So I took her in.
And I remember that Sunday because it was me, you, and her.
Yeah.
I remember helping her out of
Yeah.
the back door, and you pulled the car around to the front of the house.
Yeah. And then, so we went in on Sunday, and then Monday morning I was in there and talked to the doctor, and then he said something about, running out of time, and I said, "Oh, what are we talking about?" And he said, "Well, didn't she talk to you?" And I said, "No." Why? I said, "What are we talking? Are we talking about months here and weeks?" No, he said, "I'm talking hours." And he predicted then, he said, it'd be a Tuesday or Wednesday is when she'll go, and she went on Wednesday. And I was sitting there talking to her. I'd went home and had lunch at noon, and I come back and I had the checkbook, and she had written the check but didn't write down in the register what it was. So I took it along with me. I said, "Do you remember what that was?" And this is what we were talking about when all of a sudden she just started bleeding out of her mouth. And
you never told me that.
No, and I hollered for the nurse, and she come and just held a pan there, and she just bled to death. And this is what he had predicted. He said the tumor is pressing on the artery going up her back. This is why she's got all this pain. And he said it's going to burst. And when that does, he said that's going to be the end. And there's nothing we can do about it. And so anyway, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, she was gone like 5 minutes. She was gone.
Wow.
It's like that, yeah.
And then there was the funeral.
Huh?
The funeral was on Friday. Or no, the funeral was on Saturday.
It was on a Saturday, yeah.
And Jeff had just graduated from high school.
Just graduated from high
He was
school.
going to go to NSU.
Yeah.
Jim was over at Moritz State. I was
Yeah.
still in high school.
Yeah, you were still in high school, yeah. So, yeah, we managed.
Should we talk about your hemorrhoids?
No.
I'm still trying to block that on my head.
You helped me out there.
I was your nurse, and I didn't really like it.
No, I guess not.
I remember you asking for help. And
Yeah.
I remember I was in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And Jeff was in the hallway. And Jeff knocked on the door and said, "Mike, Dad wants your help."
Yeah.
And that's how I got roped into it.
Yeah. I called you from school, got you out of school.
I remember that. Yeah.
I was really hurting. I thought that was going to be it. Well, then I got an infection, and they didn't do surgery right away. So I spent like a week in the hospital. And
Yep.
finally I said to the doctor, "If you're not going to do anything, just call me a cab. I'll get out of here." No, he said, "Let me talk to this other surgeon." Then he come back in about a half hour, and he said, "This guy's going to help me. We'll do surgery in the morning." And he said, "I don't know what to do." That's Dr. Zarek. And he turned out, after I had the surgery, he was very, very nice. He would, when I'd go in, I had to go in for checkups there about 3 different times, and he'd always just kick the door shut and sit down and visit. And he, he had a couple of boys, and he was having a lot of trouble. They were into drugs and everything, and he always said, "You really have 3 nice boys." He always said, "Well, they come up here every day and visit you and everything," and he said, "My boys wouldn't do that." So, yeah.